Dr. Mike Tildesley is a member of the Scientific Pandemic Influenza Group on Modelling, SPIM. You'll have seen their name in the newspapers, which advises the government on the spread of coronavirus. And he joins us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, the big concern here has been that we've had 105 cases identified as South African variant. 11 of those are believed not to have any link with people arriving from South Africa. And that is the concern that it's now sort of settled into community. 80,000 people are now going to be facing mass testing in various different parts of the country to see and identify how widespread it might be. Lots of talk, mutant variants. The Matt Hancock, the health secretary yesterday, is basically saying people must stay at home in those crucial 8 postcodes. But interestingly, Public Health England has said that they are not expecting a surge of cases because this new strain is no more transmissible than, say, the Kent strain currently in the country and has no evolutionary edge over it. How worried should we be?
Well, Benedict's already made some great points, actually, about, what happens with viruses and the fact that they mutate all the time. And you're right. I'm very much on the side of Public Health England here in terms of, yes, it is more transmissible than strains that were circulating prior to November when this new variant emerged. But there is no evidence to suggest it's more transmissible than this Kent variant, as it were, which is already very widely circulating. So the real probably concern to me is whether the vaccines will provide protection against this new variant. There is some suggestion that they will, but perhaps the protection won't be quite as strong as against other variants that are circulating. So it may be that what needs to happen in the longer term is vaccine companies might need to go back and do some tweaks to their vaccines to make sure that they are more protective against this South African variant if it does become extremely widespread in the population.
But that is not a big troublesome issue. We see tweaking to vaccines all the time. We see that with the flu jab as well. Is there not a case that if you seek, you will find? So we are the world forefront of genome sequencing, and we have shared that with the rest of the world. We've got some fantastic academic research into that, and therefore we are able to identify. We're looking for these different variants, and therefore we identify these variants. And when you look for them with specific testing, mass testing to find them, you will find them. This is going to be happening in every country that has the virus. There are new variants everywhere inside a country, spreading around different countries, and that this is what happens to viruses. This is being played out as if it's a zombie apocalypse in terms of we were coping okay, but now there's a new strain, everyone back in your homes even more. That's simply not a fair representation of what's happening, surely.
Oh, no, that's absolutely right. I think this is the natural sort of life course of viruses, as it were. They do mutate, and generally, what viruses do is they mutate to sort of survive better, if that makes sense. So in the longer term, what we tend to see is that viruses mutate to often milder forms. And generally, this sounds flippant and it's not meant to be, but, it's not in the virus's interest to try to kill its host. So generally, in the longer term, you do find that when these viruses tend to become endemic, they generally are milder. So that hasn't happened with the coronavirus variants yet, but it's something that in the longer term could happen. It may be we have a situation long term similar to seasonal influenza, that we have to have vaccines every winter to protect whatever is circulating, but it's certainly not the zombie apocalypse, not something we should be massively panicky about, but just that we should be aware about as things move forward to try to make sure that we keep these new variants under control if they are more transmissible.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, as Benedict was saying, being cautious. Of course, we should be cautious. We should be noting. We should be checking on this. But we have seen infection rates fall in the past few weeks. I think January the 10th was our absolute peak in terms of infective cases. We've seen hospitalizations fall. We've seen deaths fall. The direction is all in the right. The travel is all in the right direction currently. But we're told that the Prime Minister has now been told that, yes, Chris Whitty's confirmed infection rates have passed, the peak has passed. It's interesting that the Prime Minister didn't notice that 2 weeks ago when the rest of us looking at the data noticed that. But if we are going to have, thousands of different variations all the time of this virus, it's going to be all over the world, we're never going to be able to stop, even with a full closure of our border and quarantine hotels, we're never going to be able to stop mutations of this virus. And is it desirable to try to do so?
Well, this is really difficult because you're absolutely right. In the long term, and this is why, the WHO in recent weeks have actually talked about the vaccination programs needing to be worldwide rather than country specific, because we need to get high levels of protection across the world. Even if we get things under control in our own country, unless we close our borders to all travel forever, we're going to get these variants being reintroduced. So probably looking long term, the idea of eradication is just off the table. It's not going to happen. And we're going to have to find a way in the long term to live with this virus. And that's why repeated vaccination campaigns, maybe tweaking the virus every year to be protective against whatever's circulating, is what we are going to have to do. And I think the key thing is not eradicating it, but when do we get it down to, and it's awful to think about, but when do we get the deaths down to a low enough level that they're lower than, say, deaths from other causes, death from influenza, maybe they're similar to that. And then at that point, we can cautiously think about getting back to normal. And I think that's where we're going to have to be. We're not going to eradicate this. So how are we going to live with it?
And this is the crucial thing. A lot of us, and maybe people like me, have been making this point for a very long time, that all this talk, this warlike language, we're going to defeat the virus. No, we're not. No, we're not. One virus has been defeated. It took about 60 years of trying. Everything else hasn't. And a very different kind of virus as well. But this is the thing. We are going to have to learn to live with it. And the question at that point is at what level of deaths do we learn to live with it? Now, different people will have different views on that. But in terms of, even when you expressed it, you were couching it in sort of, we shouldn't. It's not nice to think of it in these terms, but we accept a level of deaths in every other area of life. We accept that people will die of flu every year, and we don't lock down. We've had, tens of thousands of excess deaths in recent other years from flu. No one at any point said, let's lock down the entire country and stop children from going to school and close down the borders. We accept risks from people drink driving, and yet we don't ban everyone from drinking or ban everyone from driving. We accept risks every single day from people doing normal activities. And this is about relative risk, isn't it? And relative risk to different parts of the population. When do you think we should start thinking about, I'm thinking about us not locking down minutes before we start locking down, but when do you believe, your area of expertise, that this country should start being released from lockdown?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything you've said. And just as, I made the point actually yesterday, we get about 450 deaths per day from cancer, but we're not banning smoking, alcohol, and forcing people to take an hour of exercise every day, which would reduce the cancer deaths. In the longer term, we do need to think, and it is awful to think about these figures of what are we prepared to cope with as society. I think when we start to see the pressure coming off our hospitals, the death numbers are starting to go down. We had 400 deaths yesterday. That was a Monday, and we know they're normally lower, but actually it was lower than the previous Monday. They are starting to come down. I think we should be in the position within the next month or so that we could cautiously ease out. In the first instance, we need to think about schools, clearly. Primary school children, I hope we'll be able to get back to school sooner rather than later. Excuse me, and then cautiously start to ease out at that point.